Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is Nate. I also go by Hockey Boy Nate, and today we are still discussing the threat for a severe weather outbreak to occur in the mid part of this week for the Deep South. But before we get started, I'd like to take the time to ask you all to do me a favor. Hit that like button down below, subscribe if you're new, turn on notifications, share this with friends and family and on social media. And that way, other people can stay informed of this event, because this one does seem to be relatively impactful for the Deep South here. So let's get into it. Let's have the SPC tell us exactly what they think is going to happen. But today there is a marginal risk, a small marginal risk for Missouri into Kansas, and then from Alabama into Mississippi. Marginal would typically be a 5% chance for wind, hail, and a 2% chance for tornadoes. And in this case, you have a 5% for hail, which you'd have, that would be the probability of 1-inch diameter hail or larger. Wind is the same, but it would be 58-mile-per-hour winds or larger. And then you also have your 2% tornado risk located in those areas. So Kansas City, Birmingham, Montgomery, you guys are in the risk. But that's not why we are here today, even though these areas are still going to be impacted again. The possibility for Missouri to be impacted the next day, and the possibility for the Deep South to be impacted on Wednesday. So day 2, here's the day 2 outlook, and you can see this massive marginal risk. I mean, look at this. It expands practically almost 1/4 of the entire country. It goes from the southern parts, just the little southern parts of Iowa, down into Nebraska, down to much of Missouri and Kansas, all the way down into Texas, extends into Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, little parts of Florida and South Carolina. Yeah, it takes up much of the areas here, and maybe even Memphis creeps into this here. Here, hold up, let's see if Memphis is on here. Actually, it seems as if there's other cities that are larger than Memphis, which makes sense because Dallas, Kansas City, Atlanta, Arlington, it tends to be quite large cities. But then you also have this slight risk right here for southern parts of Kansas into Oklahoma, much of Oklahoma actually, including Oklahoma City and Tulsa. So, you do have the beginning stages of this low pressure system that'll push on through and can create some a decent chance for severe weather. So let's go into the hail. A 5% chance extends for the marginal risk. The slight risk, however, which includes 15% chance for winds, hail, and then a 5% chance for tornadoes if it's designated as a slight risk for tornadoes. You have a 15% chance for hail right here. So as I mentioned before, 15% chance of you getting 1 inch and above. Wind, 15% chance of you seeing winds over 58 miles per hour. And then there's still this giant 2%. They decided not to go 5% for the tornado risk. So a widespread 2% tornado risk across the board here in the marginal risk areas. And then as we move into day 3, this is the event we are talking about. This is Wednesday here. So Wednesday is a massive enhanced risk with a marginal and a slight risk here. So the slight risk extends from Kansas all the way into Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, Georgia, Florida, all the way around into the southern parts of Louisiana and Texas, as well as Oklahoma. And then the slight risk actually gets into the little parts of Oklahoma and Texas, all the way into Louisiana, almost all of Alabama, little bits into Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky, Illinois, Missouri, Mississippi. And then the enhanced risk basically covers the central to eastern parts of Arkansas, northeastern parts of Louisiana, into the central to northern parts of Mississippi, and almost all of Alabama except for the northeastern and southeastern parts, as well as the Mobile, Alabama region. So definitely something to keep in mind, that the Storm Prediction Center has intensively looked at this event, and that there could possibly be a large threat for some severe storms. And just one thing that I wanted to mention here, in the summary, they have mentioned, and I quote, I'll zoom it in for you all so you guys can read it with me. A broad area of severe weather potential, including risk for large hail, damaging winds, and several tornadoes, is anticipated Wednesday from the Arkansas, Louisiana vicinity eastward across the central Gulf Coast states / southern Appalachians. So they also anticipate that there could very well be a tornado threat with this severe weather event on Wednesday. So that is something to keep in mind too. And just by using several, which would mean 7 or above or something like that, that would be on the threshold of a potential tornado outbreak. A tornado outbreak needs at least 6 tornadoes. Yeah, I know, that's pretty low in my opinion. It should be like 10. But at least 6 tornadoes to be considered a tornado outbreak. The threat for severe weather is very high on Wednesday, and people need to continue to monitor that as that continues to get closer and closer. We will continue to update it as long as we continue to post videos in the morning, and I will most likely stream on Wednesday. So if you guys are excited for that, just stay tuned, and we'll be able to get that out to you. Let's take a look at the NAM model, the North American model, and see what exactly is happening today. So you have your low pressure system that was here from jeez. Oh yeah, there we go. So we have our low pressure system. I was about to say, what in the world's going on? So our low pressure system that passed on through here that caused the tornado outbreak in the northern panhandle of Texas. This low pressure system brings along its cold front. You can see this kind of armband that swirls around from the low pressure system. If you can imagine it like a hurricane, you know, if I were to draw a second band right here, it's a crappy drawing, but you know what I mean. Low pressure systems are kind of like a hurricane, except it's on land and it doesn't have as intense winds as the higher categories of a hurricane, but still it creates these cold fronts that could potentially bring severe weather. And indeed, this line right here is the threat for severe weather today, with the 5% chance for wind, hail, and the 2% chance for tornadoes later on. But you can see right here, as time goes along, this is Monday morning into Tuesday afternoon. Look at this. You also have the chance for some snow and some isolated precip like freezing rain and sleet across portions of Indiana into Ohio. And then snow extends from northern parts of Illinois all the way into Minnesota. So you guys aren't exactly done and over with your winter threat, even though most of the southern parts of the country is starting to deal with massive severe weather events. So something to keep in mind with that you could potentially see some winter weather conditions. Monday afternoon into the evening, you can see the severe weather threat still exists into those parts of Alabama and Mississippi, like we mentioned earlier. And then there's also the little bit of severe weather that could be happening around Missouri and Kansas. That would be mainly because a low pressure system is moving through, and if there's any thunderstorms that can develop over there, then there could be the chance for some gusty winds, maybe a little bit of large hail and tornadoes, but small chance for all of those risks. Very small in my opinion. So as we continue into Tuesday morning, you can see that there is a new low pressure that starts to form. It came over here from the coast and it starts to swing on through. And actually, just to back up the evidence of that from the North American model, you can see that low pressure by these little blue lines. You see how they kind of come around and dip down like this? This is usually indicative of a low pressure system. And that's the same thing for over here. You can see the low pressure system, these little dotted lines, red and blue. They dot around, they swirl around, and that right there is indicative of a trough, or a dip in the jet stream. And so you can see the low pressure system move over the Rockies. It starts to get its act together over the Central Plains, and boom, you have another low pressure system that can cause severe weather. There's the smaller risk. This is on Tuesday afternoon. The North American model actually doesn't say that there's a lot of severe thunderstorms across the board here, but that very well could change. There is a slight risk there, so it's kind of hard to say for sure if there is going to be any thunderstorm initiation, but we can take a look, continue further. And the one thing that the North American model does say is that when the low pressure comes around, there will be thunderstorms that will begin to develop on Wednesday morning. So that is something to keep in mind as it continues to move on through, that the threat for severe weather is elongated from Wednesday morning into Wednesday evening. So we'll take a look, continue to move on through the models. You can see thunderstorms continue to develop all the way into Wednesday evening, and then it'll continue as an elongated line on to Thursday. And that's one thing that I did want to mention. I know I didn't mention it earlier, but on the day 4 outlook, there actually is a 15% chance for severe weather along the coastal Carolinas, like Virginia as well, all the way down into Georgia and Florida. So that's something to keep in mind going on forward, that there is the threat for severe weather still in the south, even after the main tornado or severe weather threat happens on Wednesday. Let's take a look at the temperatures here on a global scale, or should I say US scale, because it's more or less just designated to the 48 states here in the mainland. So this afternoon for Monday, I mentioned in yesterday's video that half of the country would be in this kind of cool air, the 30s and 40s. Some areas are in the 50s because warm air can just seep in, but the Northeast is still in that cold pocket of air. So that's something to keep in mind too, that you guys really won't see that warm up until probably within the next couple of weeks, maybe even the next month. But the deep south, however, 70s, sometimes even 80s. That's pretty warm temperatures down for the deep south. So something to keep in mind with that. And then the northwestern parts of the US actually starts to warm up a little bit. You can see temperatures start to breach the 50s, maybe even the mid 50s into the 60s. So comfortable temperatures for you all. Same thing for the mid-Atlantic. You guys start to get into the 50s and 60s as well. The Northeast still in the 40s and 30s vicinity, but that's still something to keep in mind with that as well. And by this time, this is when the low pressure system is starting to push on through into the deep south. So you can see how the temperatures start to get into the 70s, which is really, really warm for these thunderstorms to be able to push on through and create a interesting severe weather threat for the coast later on this week. Dew points, this is just specifically looking for the deep south here. You can see the low pressure system with the cold front push on with these stronger dew points here, but there isn't really a whole lot of energy to back up with these, so it's just going to be more or less a severe weather threat. And so because the cold front doesn't utilize those dew points, they will actually stay within the general vicinity and continue to bring in more and more unstable air mass into the Dixie Alley region, which Dixie Alley is just this second tornado alley that extends into the deep south. So it's like right about there, right around my red circle. But dew points get into the mid 60s. Some even get into the 70s. I've seen in some spots. And you can see these little purples. They indicate 70s. And this is Wednesday evening. You can see the cold front actually surge on through with the dry line. Kind of just hammer on with this cold front, push on through. And they can create some strong gusty winds and some severe weather later on. And you can see dews still get up into the upper 60s in some spots, which is kind of concerning because that could be indicative of some stronger storms if they decide to form, or if they have the potential to form. They could be more than severe. So that's something to keep in mind as well. All right, I do want to take a look at the conditional threat here, just to be able to see what all is going on and be able to dissect this further. Actually, you know what? Let's take a look at the jet stream before we do that. The jet stream in this general vicinity isn't all too strong. It's not as strong as the one from this past Saturday was. I will say that much, but it's still relatively strong in some spots. 65 knots all the way up to 75, maybe even 80 knots, which would be 75 miles per hour to 90 miles per hour. Not as strong as the 90 to 100 mile per hour jet stream, but it's still strong. It's above the what you would need for severe weather, which is 45 to 50 knots or 50 to 60 miles per hour. So, yeah, it's still above average as to what you would expect for severe weather to start, but it's not as strong as the tornado threat that caused the tornado outbreak in the northern panhandle. So that's something to keep in mind with that. But you still have the threat. You can see the low pressure system move on through Missouri. You can see the jet stream bend around. Well, actually, this is more or less a surface low, a cutoff low, and the jet stream isn't really a part of it. So this low pressure right here is kind of just creating its own force, its own energy from just surging on through and having its winds just pick up the moisture and push on for the threat for severe weather. So jet stream, as I mentioned, is around 60 to 80 knots, give or take. So 70 to 90 miles per hour. It's something that we'll have to continue to monitor as it continues to get closer and closer. All right, now let's take a look at the conditional severe threat. We'll break it down piece by piece for the deep south. So let me take a look. Let me get this up. And perfect. All righty. Wednesday morning, we can already see there is a massive supercell composite over here. So that's what I was talking about before, that there could be some storms forming into the morning of Wednesday, and that you can definitely see the chance for some severe weather happen in the early morning hours, and that could potentially push on through later on into the evening. If we take a sounding here, look at this, chat. This is actually right along where the stronger amounts of shear is. And so if you take a look at these lines and you're new, you might be looking at me and saying, Nate, all right, that's it. I'm done. You've lost me here. There's no way I'm going to be able to figure this out. I'm just going to click off the video. And, you know, you have every right to, but allow me to try and simplify this for you all. Geez, this sounding's pretty elevated. I will say that much. Will say. Allow me to explain it to you a bit further here. So there's multiple things that we look at as weather forecasters to be able to determine as to what type of an event that you could get. So first things first, what we're going to look at is this box. And all of this is determined based off of one thing. If you can imagine you're in a satellite and you're looking down to the ground and you see a dude with a weather balloon, all right? He lets go of the weather balloon, it goes up into the sky. The satellite tracks where that weather balloon goes. So you look at it, it goes up, down, left, and right, all sorts of areas. That photograph, this photograph right here, tracks where it goes. So it starts to go up, and then it goes to the right and goes down. It does a loop-de-loop, and then it goes down again. And that's what it's tracking. It's tracking these this wind right here and where this goes. And so we can actually be able to determine what the threat is going to be like just by looking at the photograph here. And so we can see that the photograph goes up and then it curls right. And what that tells me is there's spin in the atmosphere that can be able to create tornadoes. So that's something to keep in mind with all that this could potentially be a tornadic threat. And indeed, you know, if I scroll over here, the possible hazard type actually indicates that it is a PDS tornado, or PDS stands for particularly dangerous situation. So that's something to keep in mind too, that there could potentially be the threat for tornadoes with the hodograph being as enlarged and elongated as it is. Let's take a look at the convective aspect. We'll look at this box right here, and this one looks a lot more complex than the hodograph, and to an extent it is a little bit, but the temperature, which is indicated in the red line, as it goes higher up in the atmosphere, it gets colder, but at the surface it's 68 degrees. The dew points is 65, which is actually not bad. You need at least 60 to be able to acknowledge the fact that there is severe weather that could produce tornadoes. But at least 60. It's at 65. It's a bit concerning because it's 5 degrees over 60, and that may not seem like a big difference, but trust me, it is. CAPE, which is the convective available potential energy, that's the energy that thunderstorms kind of feed off of. The amount of buoyant force that's measured between warm air rising and cold air sinking. That measure is determined in CAPE, and so the more CAPE you have, the stronger the storms will be. And in this case, you have your surface CAPE at the moment around 1,477, and you want at least 750 joules per kilogram, all the way up to 2,000 to be able to consider thunderstorms in general. So it's right in the middle of it. It's half and half, but the wind shear should be able to back it up. So if any sort of thunderstorms do form, it very well could kick off and become tornadic. But I will say one thing: the forecast for the CAPE is around 2,607 joules per kilogram. You can see that on the third number down. So that is something to keep in mind too. The K index, which basically, if you have a higher number, it has a greater likelihood of forming thunderstorms. So it's around 38, so that's not too bad. It's actually pretty good. You want a minimum 30, and it's 8 above that, and it goes up to 60. So that's something to keep in mind, that it does have a decent chance for forming thunderstorms. Lapse rates, surface to 3 kilometers, not the best, I will admit. It's 6.1. But you want at least 7 in order to consider, updraft potential, whether it's tornadoes or hail. This is more or less the hail indicator as to if you're going to get any strong ones. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And then last but not least, helicity, which measures all the energy from the winds to a certain spot in the air where inflow can actually move into the storm. And in this case, it's right around 3 kilometers up in the sky. So the helicity in this case would be 580, and you want at least 200 to consider tornadoes. So the fact that it is more than double, almost triple the amount, that is concerning as well. And the surface to 1 kilometer helicity is around 461, which is double the amount of what you would anticipate for tornadoes. So something to keep in mind, that it has the wind shear, just doesn't have the energy to kick off. And we'll be able to see that later on here into the afternoon and evening hours. So let's take a couple soundings here, and we'll be able to look at it for ourselves. So, yep, hodograph does that right turn. That is true. That is the indicative of a tornadic sounding. Dew points in around 67. That's above 65, which means it's worse. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Level of free convection and low cloud level, you guys who are new don't really know what this is, but it's relatively low, and so that means that there's not really an inhibiting factor with this. So this checks off too, that you have the opportunity, if thunderstorms were to develop, for mature thunderstorms. CAPE, this is where things get a bit interesting, everyone. The convective available potential energy is around 2,881 joules per kilogram. That's above what you would typically want for thunderstorms, so which means you could very well get thunderstorms. You very well could. K index is 29, which is around 30. That's something that you can consider thunderstorms if it does develop along the cold front or anything out in front of the line. Lapse rates are above the 7s here. You typically don't look at this if you look at the top two. Surface to 3 kilometers 7.3, 3 to 6 kilometer is 7.4 for a surface of 3 kilometer. 3 kilometer to 6 kilometer is 7.3. So you do have the chance for some severe hail and updraft characteristics for tornadoes. Helicity is not as bad as it is earlier in the morning, but 327 is still interesting. And surface to 1 kilometer helicity is 229. So that is indicative that you could potentially get some a tornadic threat from this sounding. One final thing is that 3 Cape, most people don't know what 3 Cape is, and I won't take the time to explain it a whole lot, but for you weather enthusiasts, 3 Cape is around 182, so that is something to keep in mind, that there very well could be the threat for some severe weather with that. Take another sounding here. This is later on in the evening, like towards the afternoon hours. Photograph still veers off to the right. That indeed checks out. The helicity is around 523. That checks out. This sounding is a little bit elevated, I will say, but that's, it is what it is. We'll figure that out. Dew points 68 degrees. That checks out. 70 degrees Fahrenheit is the temperature. Cape is forecasted to be 2,761, but the Cape at the moment when we take this sounding is 1,582, so that it is something to consider with that. K index is 38, which does you could get some thunderstorms form off with that, so that's something to keep in mind. Lapse rates, I will say, at the surface of the 3 kilometer region is pretty bad, so 5.8 is kind of meh, but 3 to 6 kilometer region, 7.3 is not too bad at all. So you could definitely get some updraft characteristics higher up, mainly for hail, but not as much tornadoes. And then surface to 1 kilometer helicity is 409, which means that you could definitely get some spin-ups within that general vicinity. So some conflicting things that we are seeing in the soundings here. Some things are up, some things are down. Some things that could be contradicting here to each other. Something to keep in mind as we continue to get closer and closer to this event on Wednesday, that it isn't perfect, but the threat for severe weather is still there. So anyways, guys, that's going to be it for me. If you guys did enjoy the video, please be sure to leave a like. Subscribe if you are new, and turn on notifications so that you can be up to date with all the content that I do, whether it's videos just like this every single morning, or whether it's severe weather live streams to where we break down these events live and try and help people. So if you want to do that, if you want to turn on notifications to be up to date, that'd be greatly appreciated. Share this with friends and family as well as on social media so that people can get the word out that these thunderstorms are coming. And yeah, that's going to be it. My name's Nate. I also go by Hockey Boy Nate, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.